Okay, so we're moving on to theory. So we've actually progressed quite a lot of subjects now in Year 12. We've looked at family, we have looked at research methods, we've done our introduction, so our core themes, and you're in the process of finishing education and moving on to your Year 13 topic of beliefs. I think we need to go over and we need to recap on some of the theory, some of the perspectives. So hopefully what you took away on the last day was the theory and methods topic companion and all of the sociologists for this section and what they said and what they did. And now I'll try and give you a bit more of a in-depth overview of each of the perspectives, the ones that you struggle on the most. So you're happy with functionalism in general, but I will do a video on that and for you to go over as well if you aren't that strong with it. And I think the key ones that we need to look at are social action, Marxist, and sort of like the postmodern aspect of it as well. So I'll do a video on all of them, make notes on all of them, because we're not going to have time when we eventually get back to go over theory. Okay, so it's kind of all on you now to make the most of sort of this time to go over and do it. So, Marxism then. Our end goal then is to be able to answer this question successfully. A 20 marker would be sort of looking at material from item C and your own knowledge, evaluate the usefulness of Marxist approaches to our understanding of society. So for a 20 marker, we're looking at 8 marks for AO1, 6 for AO2 and 6 for AO3. So a lot of emphasis on your knowledge and an even split between application and analysis evaluation. So I would say for all of these topics, write an answer. So plan it, write it and send it to me. I am going to set you weekly homework that I want you to submit to me via email so I can give you feedback and put it on your mark book so I still have an idea of your current grade. They are pointless though if you are doing it with notes in front of you. There's nothing for me to go on to say that you have or haven't done that. But for you, it makes sense not to do it with your notes. Spend some time revising it and planning it and then write it from that. Don't have notes in front of you because then it's not really an accurate representation as to where you are. So, a Marxism recap then. You've got some key words. Have a go at writing your own response or on your own talking through it. What would you use? What would you bring in to give you a nice summary of what Marxism actually is? You've got some lovely key words there: class consciousness, ruling class, a conflict structural macro approach. Have a discussion with yourself. Feel free to stop this and do that. And then we'll delve into some of the key bits of Marxism. So, key aspect, a key term for this is capitalism. So capitalism being basically the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and we're working in this idea of the bourgeoisie, our ruling class, what word am I looking for? They are... what word am I looking for? Exploiting! There it is. Exploiting the proletariat for their benefit. So then we have these big companies, these corporations, the government, getting stronger, getting richer, getting more powerful, and our working class, frontline workers, are getting poorer. They're not benefiting. Okay, that's the main crux of Marxism. So it's a conflict macro theory. So that means it looks from the top down. So it's looking at how your corporations, the government, the education system, the healthcare system, how they are controlling and manipulating sort of individuals. So it's a conflict macro top-down theory. And it's looking at how it shapes society. So the economy shapes society. Capitalist society is incredibly unequal with these class differences between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So they're exploiting them, they're brainwashing them, they're giving them cheap labour, making them work harder for basically no money so that they benefit. So the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Some other key words there in purple are this idea of hegemony. So we've got they arguing that the ruling class create an ideology which keeps the working class within this idea of hegemony. So they're accepting, okay, this is how it's always going to be. People are going to be richer than me. This is, I can't change that. So this idea of hegemony is just this, they can't get out of where they are. They're just accepting their place within society. They're not challenging it. There's no uprising. It is what it is. And Marxists would argue that this working class, they're not aware of how much they're being exploited. So this idea of false class consciousness. As things get worse, people come together and they overthrow the system. But how likely does that happen? One thing I would always do for your AOT, when you do a little bit of extra research, is go away and find, things. Where has it been that there's been a massive uprising? Can we think of any times where people have got together, they're not happy with the system, and they've worked together and tried to overthrow it? I think of a few off the top of my head. So you've got the London riots. Oh, when was that? 2011? Around that time, 2011, the London riots. People were not happy. That was more of a sort of black minority groups coming together because they weren't happy with the police, but still applies here. People coming together, not happy with their position, and there being an uprising. Have a look. There's a load in Greece. People coming together, and there's been riots because they overpay. So there's loads out there that you can go and have a look at. But they're not aware of that they're being exploited. They're going to come together and overthrow the way that it works. Now we've got a few key thinkers, key sociologists within this section. We've obviously got Marx, writing in the peak of the Industrial Revolution, thought the idea of communism was a way forward, everyone being equal, which obviously, never really works. There's always somebody that wants to have more than others. And basically saw capitalism all about greed, competition, all about profiting the bourgeoisie at the expense of our proletariat. So they're being exploited for the good of the rich. Next we've got Engels. So I think he might have been a colleague of Marx, or he was a postgraduate. I think he might have worked with Marx in some aspect. But he was looking at the idea of, in the family, which we know already, so a lovely bit of AO2 because we're synoptically linking it between what we've looked at so far. Family upholds this idea of capitalism through things like inheritance, so the rich are staying richer, they're passing it on through their family, keeping wealth within certain households. A Marxist feminist would have a field day with this, looking at women being treated as private property to be owned through the institution of marriage, and basically trying to uphold it within the whole family unit, trying to pass on that idea of capitalism. Having more children, providing more workers to keep the capitalist system ticking over. Then we have Althuser, so our neo-Marx. So neo-Marx is basically, we'll look at it a bit more in a minute. Basically, they've looked at some of the weaknesses of traditional Marxism, taking it further, picking up some of filling in some of the holes that Marxism doesn't describe very well. So Althuser focuses on the family and education. Another key word here, ideological state apparatus. So what that means is that the family and the education system have their own ideology. They have what they want to push forward. So they're encouraging the working class to accept it as it is. If you don't do very well in school, these are the only jobs you can really go and do. And it's trying to keep them docile, trying to stop them from challenging the fact that they're being exploited, trying to stop the uprising. So we know, for example, a nice bit of AO2, that Ford will only employ married men because they know that they have people at home, they can't have an uprising, they can't challenge it because they'll lose their money. Okay, so it's quite interesting looking at it at this point of view with like the whole coronavirus. How could we use that as a bit of AO2 here? How would a Marxist, pick out or challenge it? And then we've got Gramsci, so looking at hegemony, so trying to keep the working class docile, keep them in that state of mind, trying to ensure that capitalism is maintained, that there isn't a revolution. And then something you can discuss with yourself if you want. Do you think the bourgeoisie exploit the proletariat? Do you think it's fair that some people earn more money than others? You know, is it that, how can we link that to the education system and think people go into private schools and grammar schools who have better chances? Do you think it's fair that they have better opportunities, therefore they earn more money? Or do you think it should be completely fair? So maybe like write a little paragraph on that, or have a little discussion with your dog. You might have something to say about it. So, in terms of society then, we've got 7 parts of the Marxist views, okay, which they link to. If you can find a nice acronym that isn't Mekiark, then do so. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Think of a way that you could remember the 7 views that Marxists have on society. So it'd be quite nice, easy AO1 that you could bring in. So firstly, we've got materialism. So people organise themselves in a way to cooperate in the production. I'm sorry. My dog's just come in and done a massive fart. I mean, really? Right now? Anyway, materialism. So humans use forces of production to meet their own needs. Okay, so we are quite selfish, and materialism is a main aspect of Marxism. So over time we've got division. It starts to happen between the labourers and the means of production, which means that the capitalist mode of production forms this base of society that we need and becomes quite a superstructure of institutions. Okay, so everybody is wanting more and more and more, which means that our proletariats are constantly being exploited to try and meet the needs within society. We've then obviously got exploitation, which we've mentioned earlier. So for their own benefit, they're exploiting people, they're paying them poorly, they're making them work long hours. Again, do a bit of AO2. Where have you got some interesting statistics on things like cheap labour that you could bring in? What countries exploit more individuals more? Is it Western? Is it collectivist, individualistic? So all nice bits of, well, not nice bits, but all bits of AO2 that you can bring in. Obviously, capitalism is a fundamental. It's the main thing you think of when you think of Marxism. So making a profit off of this labour, technological advances, what happens if we're more globalised, if people are always interconnected and know what's going on all around the world, we've got more technology. It's de-skilling our workforce. Our labourers, people on the front, well, not on the front line, but people who are doing those jobs become less skilled. They become less interested because they're worried that maybe something's going to take their job. You know, a machine could do this quicker than me. So then, with that aspect, we could have this idea of this false class consciousness of them people coming together and uprising. Ideology we've looked at already. So the dominant ideas of our ruling class then start to spread through institutions like the education institution. We teach certain things. Marxists would argue that we're only teaching things that are beneficial to capitalism. It then legitimises this, social order, and it subordinates the working class. It keeps them where they think they should be. Alienation, then people start to become alienated from their true nature. So our nature is to create things for our needs. It becomes mindless, it becomes repetitive, and people start to lose sight of what is actually important. So a key thing to do then for this is to create your own bank of AO2. So think about what we've looked at in family. How could you bring in some of those ideas, some of those key sociologists in family, Engels, Zaretsky, what did they say? How does that link to Marxism? And then do the same for education if you've got that far. Because anything synoptic that you can bring in across the course is nice AO2. They love to see that. Okay, so we'll move on to AO3. think about already what we have in terms of strengths and weaknesses of the perspective. So if I put them all on there and then discuss them. So it's one of our first theories, one of our first conflict theories that explains why we have this huge inequality within society. It all comes down to money, doesn't it? If you're not earning enough, if you can't provide or you're being exploited, it's there. That theory is there to show why people are unequal in society. It looks at how powerful the economy actually is in shaping relationships, as well as trying to offer solutions. So you can think right now, where is our economy at the moment? How would a Marxist go about analysing that? Really influential, Marx's ideas. Some people took it so far and tried to create this communist society. So he was a really influential sociologist. And some are still relevant. You know, we still see capitalism all around the world. And how have some countries, some developing countries, become the proletariat? So it's not on an individual basis anymore. It's on a countrywide basis. So you think some of those places that are creating your clothes for really cheap labour, they are the proletariat. They are working for those big companies, providing them with profit. But it doesn't come without its weaknesses. So it focuses solely on social class. But what about other parts of someone's identity? Ethnicity, gender. You know, it doesn't look at how that is potentially unequal. You could argue that Marxist feminist tries to alleviate some of that, because they're looking at how it's not just how a woman is, exploited by capitalism, but also just for being a woman, so that the gender as well. The communist revolution, like we mentioned earlier, isn't successful. It doesn't happen universally. It takes a lot of time. And personality and individual factors are really important. There's always going to be somebody who wants to be the leader. So the communist society, the revolution, it's just not practical. Some argue that actually we're becoming too fair. So things like the welfare state, free healthcare to all, our benefit system. So if you link that back to in family, some of the social policies that we've looked at, you know, how would a Marxist support or go against some of those policies? And then they fail to consider things like social mobility can and does occur, and the working class do increase their life chances. So just because you're from a working class background doesn't mean you can't, you know, push through that glass ceiling and actually go on to achieve. So it makes assumptions that if you're in that certain class, you're not going to progress any further than, you know, based on your class. So neo-Marxism then is an advancement to that. So traditional Marxism is Marx and some of our traditional sociologists here, but our neo-Marx try and take it a bit further. So they are understanding that they're outdated, they're problematic, they're not necessarily relevant. And what a neo-Marx perspective is it's looking at ideas created by the ruling class, so by the bourgeoisie, applying it to the working class through things like religion, media, law, education in the family, and the ways it makes it difficult to challenge. So it takes it a bit further in looking at things that are a little bit more institutionally wide, so things like religion. So oppressed people in Latin America, a bit of AO2 here, using religion as a force for change and greater equality, called the liberation theology. Have a look, it's really interesting and really relevant to beliefs. So using institutions to exploit people in a way that's positive or negative. So Gramsci is one of our key thinkers in neo-Marx, and he emphasises the power of ideas in shaping society rather than just the economy. So whereas traditional Marxism is all about the economy and capitalism, Gramsci's looking at this idea of relative autonomy from the economic base. So it's not just about the economy, it's about how ideas can shape society, how different factors within society have quite a relevant importance. So things like the state maintains power through hegemony, yeah, we've looked at that already. They're imposing it on the working class, making sure they can't challenge it. But Gramsci's saying that people can use intellectual ideas to produce a collective struggle and change society. So people come together and try and change it for a positive. So think of some examples that we might think of that, you know, people coming together and changing it for the better. I can't think of it off the top of my head. They've come together, changed it for the positive. Maybe pushing through certain laws could be a way that we could look at that. So it's not necessarily a revolution and people trying to change it economically, but trying to change factors within society instead. Althusser, also a neo-Marx, says that we've got society developing on 3 levels. So we've got the economic level, all about the money, the political level, and the ideological level, so people having those key ideas. And these 3 levels justify capitalism in a variety of different ways. Ideas are really important in changing society, but the economy is still really relevant. It's still the most important thing to shaping individuals, isn't it? Money is the root of all evil, and they agree that it's still important, but they're looking at other factors as well. That's the key with neo-Marx. So why it's good? It's updating those ideas. It's making it more applicable to a contemporary society. Acknowledges the power that ideas have in shaping it. We can't say that neo-Marxism isn't economically deterministic. Traditional Marxism is, because our neo-Marx are seeing society being shaped, you know, not just by the economy, whereas traditional Marxists are. But a weakness is the focus on class may be less relevant now. Maybe we do need to focus a bit more on ethnicity and gender and how that has more of an impact. Are we still are we still in a class society? Well, we've got working class, middle class, upper class, or is it blending? Are people changing their class? So is it still important? Now, our post-structuralist and our postmodernist, which we'll look at in a few lessons' time, argue that neo-Marxism relied on structural approach. Do we still have a structural society? Are our institutions still having a power over us? Or is it, you know, we have more of a power over them? So that's interesting. So what I want you to do is to plan this question. So the one that we had right at the start, evaluate the usefulness of Marxist approaches using the item in every single paragraph, 20 marker, a brief introduction as to what you're going to talk about, and an evaluative conclusion. You're looking at 5 to 6 good detailed paragraphs. What I have done for you is a little bit of a summary on each of those sociologists. So you can always do this without looking at those. What is their USP? What is their main assumption? Are there examples you can think of, and how could you assess them? So I have that on here. But if you're really pushing yourself, which you should be, do that yourself. Then I have got a model answer for that question, but I don't want you to look at that yet. I want you to do yours, then compare it. Or you can work backwards and look at the model answer and make a plan from that. Entirely up to you.